All right, we are back. Sunday, 1 o'clock, jumping on Facebook Live. I'm doing it outside today. It is beautiful out. So I decided to come outside and spent yesterday cleaning up the yard and getting the patio furniture out and all put together and ready to go. So now I'm out here enjoying the nice weather and getting ready for a couple of the hot days we got coming up here. So I posted the past 3 Facebook Lives on my YouTube channel, from survival to partnership. Obviously, they're also still up on my Facebook page. Check them out. I think that there's a lot of information there that could be helpful. When I started going through this and learning about survival patterns and triggers and inner child work and parts work, boundaries. So I never learned too much, any of it. So I don't want to assume. I'm going to say that I think there are a lot of us that haven't learned any of this. And so it just makes marriage and parenting that much harder. So anyway, yeah, check out the videos, unless you already know everything. In that case, let me know when you make a video and I'll learn from you. So today's topic is going to be on triggers. Why we get triggered, why our reactions usually make sense, but they create problems on the surface. And that's where we get into a lot of trouble, right? We might say things that we can't take back and do things that we can't turn back time on, behave in ways that don't align with who we're trying to be. And so I want to help you make sense of why we react the way we do, where it's coming from, how it's tied into our past, our childhood, home environment, how we were raised, what was the neighborhood we grew up in like, what was school like, how were the teachers, coaches. We get into a lot of it. And in the past couple of videos, the last one I did, I talked about the needs that we all go through and that we all need, especially going through those developmental stages of life. And each of those developmental stages, they build off the previous stage. You don't start out, knocking out 5th grade math. You start kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade, right? You build little by little. Same with needs, in the developmental stages, and hopefully how parents are trying to show up on a consistent basis with. But, by the time you get to teenage years, you could be dealing with more problems based off of really what happened or didn't happen in the infancy stage and in the toddler stages. It's just hard to kind of wrap our head around that. Because many times we just see what's right in front of us. So my job and, the work I've been doing in my own life it's deeper. It's deeper than you think. Deeper than you're aware of. And I want to help you become aware and see where your adult reactions are coming from. Why do you have certain parts of you that react in certain ways? And what are those parts trying to protect you from? I think one of the biggest struggles that we have in relationships and marriage and parenting is, how reactive we can become. I've seen so many parents live in their reactivity and chalk it up as kind of normal. They regret it. They don't like it. They feel guilty. They apologize after, but they just do it again. They, in their mind, they're trying. They're trying their best. They don't like how they responded. Now, I've heard many dads actually say this to me. They don't like how angry they get with their kids. But it keeps happening. And the hard part when this happens is many of us can either be pretty hard on ourselves and shame ourselves, or we try to take accountability. We try to take responsibility. We don't want anybody else doing that for us. And we could still blame others. Our reactivity can still come out on other people, even our kids. So those are the two areas where people, when they get triggered, go into. Either shaming and blaming themselves, or shaming and blaming others. And what I want to do as a coach is to help people make sense of their triggers. So let's start with, what is a trigger? Usually, a current situation is triggering or activating something older that's already inside of you. So people want to say, you're triggering me. But that's because they already carry something that's unhealed, hasn't been looked at. They haven't addressed. So anytime we get triggered, it's our work. It's where we need to show up, the change we need to go through. And getting triggered usually means your nervous system learned to react in a certain way for a reason. Now, your reason is what's happening right in front of you. Well, I reacted this way because my wife said this. I reacted this way because my husband, he did this. I reacted this way because my kids did this. And you could just go on and on, right? You understand what I'm getting at. That's where our mind goes to. But usually, for many of us, it's because our nervous system has been built and wired already, possibly long before our husband or wife or children even came into the picture. And I've said this before, but it's just that a spouse and children can really highlight our wounds, which is why we get so reactive, which is why our nervous system is on high alert a lot of times. Change is hard because our reactions, they just happen so fast, our logical mind doesn't have any time to catch up. So this is what's confusing and what's hard, is because we can read a lot. We can understand. And I hear so many adults do this even with me when we're having conversations. They're like, yeah, no, I totally understand. Like, oh, I totally get it. And it's great that they understand and that they get it. But they're not in it when they're talking to me. They're not triggered. They're calm. They're in a reflective state for the most part. Right, so the work is, when you're triggered, I want you to keep that in mind for this talk. It's when you're triggered, what happens? And that's the work. Your body can react before your mind catches up to it. So the podcasts and the talks that you have with friends, and you say, oh, okay, all right, it's a great idea. Okay, good, all right. Excellent, okay, now I know. And the moment you are triggered, Everything you've learned, all the intellectual knowledge, all the good advice you've heard is out the window. And there you are, reacting in a way that you can't get out of. You're in it. And that's what I want you to keep in mind. I know what it's like to get triggered. It still happens for me. There are different ways that I handle it today versus what it was like many years ago and even a couple of years ago, especially within marriage and parenting, which is why I do a lot of these talks. Because I know for me, I didn't even realize what was happening. Same way I know so many of you don't. I don't know how deep this is. I don't survival pattern, survival mode. Like I never heard any of it. I don't know what you're talking about. You know, I'm a learner, intellectualizer. I'm trying to get the information, and then I'm going to use that the next time, and it never worked. And I just couldn't wrap my head around. Again, I'm trying to think. Why do I emotionally shut down? Why is that? Where's that coming from? See, in my mind, I could give you 100 reasons. They all make great sense to me. It's creating chaos in the home. It's creating disconnection, which is a big one. But for me, it makes sense in my nervous system. When I withdraw, I get quiet, right? Very almost cold, one word answer. How you doing? What's the matter with you? Well, fine. Something the matter? Nope. All good over here. What I've learned now is that this is my nervous system. Something's threatened inside of me. Something old. And this is the way I react to it. I've talked about this in previous talks. Other times I get very defensive. I have a very solid defensive part. It's right there. Trying to explain myself, justify myself, prove my points. I want other people to nod. Yeah, I get off. They're terrible. How could they treat you like that? I get it. Very defensive. Now, my defensive part, I've learned, is just a part of me. It's not all of me. I'm not always defensive. And sometimes I'm trying to help myself out. So let's say you are being attacked by somebody, you might get defensive. Let's say they're talking to you in a way that puts you down. Right? Maybe they say something like, hey, how many times do I have to tell you to take out the garbage? Like, what's so hard about that? You might get defensive. And I see this so much in marriages where we just talk to our loved one in a way where they're just going to get defensive. And the moment their system is on alert and they're defensive, it's going to trigger our old wounds. But what I get when I get people in front of me and couples in front of me is usually it's about the argument. It's about the conflict that they constantly have. They don't understand survival responses. They don't know that they're reacting from something old inside of them. No, if their spouse would change, they're good. If their kids just listen the first time, they're good. But when we don't heal our triggers, it just leads to further disconnection. the emotional distance. That's not how we really want to live with our spouse. But our nervous system is going to go that route because that's what keeps us feeling less attacked, less criticized, less blamed. Anything else we might feel. I might get reactive because I don't really feel heard. See, I never fully understood why I react the way I did. And the hard part for me, and I've shared this before, was I was sober over 10 years. I mean, I've done a ton of sacrifice. I was trying to live by certain spiritual principles, and I had good people in my life, spiritual people I considered. That's for me. It's not where the answer is. And I could do this parenting as well. Moments with my son where my reactions were way bigger than they should have been, for the situation. And, stuck with that feeling of what's happening. Maybe even put it on him. Well, that's on him. He wants to make bad decisions. He wants to not listen. But it's amazing how much tension I feel in my body. Why am I getting so triggered by a 3-year-old? That's things I started asking myself. Why am I so triggered by a 5-year-old, 6-year-old, 7-year-old? Like, what is that? Why do I lose my cool all the time? I'm so impatient with a young child, irritated with them. And I'm trying. I don't want it to show. I'm trying to hold it in. Trying to put the smile on sometimes. But again, I don't realize I'm battling myself. I can look back with more clarity now that I've been doing this work over the past couple of years. And I see that my reactions often had more to do with me than with my wife or my son. And that's a good thing in a way. Because it's like, okay, that means I have a lot of work to do. That means, wait a second, change can happen. Sometimes you might feel hopeless in your situation because nobody's changing. But maybe you're not changing either. I started to see that what was really happening within me was more about that than about what was happening with my son. Or my wife. It's hard to empathize when you're wrapped up in what you have going on. When you're in your own survival mode. It's hard to be there for others. It's hard to be emotionally safe when you're triggered all the time. When your system is always on high alert of who's a threat, how it's impacting your system. I can't teach you and show you how to emotionally regulate as a parent. I don't know how to do it. Because when we are parents and we stay in survival mode, we're always going to stay reactive, emotionally unavailable, controlling, impatient, irritated, disconnected. Kids take in all of that. What I come across a lot of times with adults, especially with marriages and with kids, is defensiveness. That's top of the list. That's why marriage counseling is so difficult when you both try to do it together. You both go in there on, feeling threatened. You're already on guard. You're already defensive. And it's so hard to have a conversation with two adults when they're both living in survival mode. It's very challenging to do. One might get emotionally reactive, the other one shuts down. Maybe you get controlling. The other one maybe gets more avoidant. There's a lot of fear there. There's not emotional safety. There's a ton of fear when we're triggered. That's the threat. Something is scaring us. Our system is nervous about something. I've heard many guys will say, I have a lot of anger issues. My wife don't like it. I have anger issues. I don't view it as anger issues. I just see it as a part of them that gets angry. And I see it as unresolved pain that they've never processed. A nervous system that's stuck in survival mode. So when I see somebody getting defensive or maybe being very critical of their spouse, I know that they're in survival mode. So how do you know when you're not in survival mode? How do you know when you're just being this loving person? Well, you're more curious to know why your spouse responds the way they do. You're genuinely trying to understand them, and your spouse will pick up on that. You have more love in your heart than resentment. You have more compassion. You're more calm. You can get triggered and still work through it and still remain somewhat regulated. There's no graduating from inner child and parts work, that's for sure. I am still working on this. It's a big part of my life. It has changed so much about me and my marriage and my parenting that I'm on here doing these calls. I have some library talks coming up soon. I would love for the room to be packed with parents, to be open to hearing a message. Because my job is never to blame parents, it's a shame. I'm a parent myself. It was tough learning. The ways I was showing up in my family weren't the healthiest. Some were out, like, in your face, okay, that's wrong. And others were like, really? Man, I was trying there. I didn't realize that it could lead to something else. So I think, as spouses and parents, we all need support. We need someone with an understanding. I would be lost if I didn't find somebody who understood inner child and parts work. I didn't understand how deep this went. And some common adult triggers that we have, and I've seen over the years within myself and within clients I work with, a big trigger for spouses and parents: feeling ignored. We do not like to be ignored at all. Now, I help people see that there's a deeper wound underneath that. That's why the reaction is so right there. We also don't like criticism, not feeling heard, feeling disrespected. Or maybe you think your spouse doesn't respect you. Rejection is another trigger. Lack of control is very triggering for people. I see control as a big one. Feeling left out. Maybe your spouse or your kids are doing things without you. Maybe your spouse is making decisions without you. Again, we have these old wounds already inside of us. Now, if we're reacting out of curiosity, out of compassion, and saying, hey, I'm just curious, how come you chose to make that decision? I would have liked to have been involved in that. Right? It's like you go back to how you feel because you state, and then you give a need. So let's say you are feeling left out. You can actually say, hey, I feel upset. You didn't include me on the decision. What I need from you is to include me. I don't want to feel left out. That's different than our reactions sometimes. Maybe your spouse comes home distracted, quiet, or doesn't greet you the way that you expected, and suddenly you feel irritated, hurt, or distant. Again, our anger stops with them. But in my experience and the work I do, it's touching something older. And I base a lot of what I deal with on 7 core wounds that we all carry. Abandonment, rejection, shame, fear, powerlessness, hopelessness, and confusion. So I also want to make clear that not every reaction of ours is something that has to do this, deeper analysis on. It's not always a trauma of ours. But strong reactions usually point to something deeper in our system. And I said this before, most of us think it's what's happening in front of us. We get lost in the story. So a lot of times with clients, what I see, and it takes time, is that they're in the story. They're in their part. Their angry part is dominating the session. And they're looking at me saying, see? This is why I'm angry. But again, their anger and the trigger is just activating something old that's already in their system. My job is to stay patient with them, help them explore this area so that we could start making sense of it. Because right now they're looking at me like, no, it's them. It's them, and I want you to be on my side, and I want you to know it's them. So it's a process, becoming aware of our reactions and what's going on with us. So let's say you do feel ignored. Could be your spouse, maybe it's your child. Maybe you asked them 5 times to put their shoes on, right? They keep ignoring me. I asked them once, nothing. I asked them a second time, nicely. They still don't listen, right? Now what I teach is we say once. The other times are just going to start the volcano to start erupting. Now that's on us. We have to catch that volcano before it comes out. So there are different ways around that and other ways that we could try to step into that. So we ask our kid, let's say, put your shoes on, and they're playing a video game, they're on the iPad, watching TV. Maybe they need help with their attention in that moment. So we help them. We take the iPad. We shut the TV off. The game gets paused. And it's not a battle. I already asked you. You know what you have to do. Consequences can come at some point. If you notice that your child starts to get very dysregulated, hold off on the consequences immediately. It's only going to escalate both of you. You're trying to stay grounded through this process. You're holding a firm boundary is what's happening. Your child is a child. They don't like boundaries. Their job is to push back. It's to not receive them well. We still don't have to get sucked in to being reactive. And the more healing work we do on our end, actually, we start to be able to handle these situations. Our kids start to respond to us. They know we mean business. They also know that they're loved. We're not punishing them. We're not shaming them. I asked you 5 times. Now, iPad's done for the day, right? It's going to be problematic. I'm not saying, taking the iPad away is a bad idea, but in that moment, it's only going to ignite both of you. And again, we're trying to stay grounded and just set a boundary. We're not trying to make them feel pain, feel bad. That's not our goal. But if we have these old wounds inside of us and we feel ignored, that's going to touch on something, right? Our rejection wound. Maybe we have an abandonment wound. Not feeling important. And so we're going to have a lot kick up. If you feel controlled by your spouse, again, you could be triggering something old inside of you, maybe powerlessness, fear, maybe your own shame that you still carry as an adult. Again, we don't know any of this. We don't know these core wounds that I teach my clients. We're just like, no, if they just listened, I wouldn't feel like this. If he just changed, I wouldn't feel like this. They're the problem. It's not to say that people don't have problems. And it's not to say that you don't have beef, a solid argument to make. But we need to check in here first before we start looking at what needs to change outside. So the situation or a person triggers you, and the wound is what gives it its intensity. When people get triggered, they usually go into survival mode. So as soon as your spouse or your child triggers you, you're in survival mode. You have parts of you that are already on the scene. You're out of it. And survival responses for all of us, they look differently depending on the person. Some have an angry part that shows up right away. Others withdraw, shut down. Some what's called fawn, right? So you have your survival mode, fight, flight, freeze, and fawning. Fawning is people pleasing. It's neglecting your own needs to meet the needs of others so that you guys can get along, to keep the peace, to stay friendly. That's survival mode. Perfectionism is another one that runs in the work I do too. A part comes up trying to stay ahead of the game with perfectionism. Again, it's a survival pattern. It's so that it doesn't lead to anything that might trigger my nervous system or an old wound of mine. Defensiveness, I already talked about that. Over-explaining and control. And maybe I'll just do a whole session just on control by itself, but control is a big one. For some people, their survival responses could also look like turning to alcohol, smoking, turning to drug use, emotional eating, constant distraction, self-harm, believe it or not, even because it's creating harm for ourselves, but it's a way our system is in protection mode. Hurting other people is a survival response, is a reaction. Escaping through work, staying constantly busy, maybe even exercise could be problematic. Sometimes survival responses can even look like over-identifying as a parent. When someone feels emotionally disconnected from their spouse, maybe they feel lonely in their marriage, rejected, maybe they're just unhappy with who they're married to, they may pour all of themselves into their children. Now, loving your kids deeply is healthy. So I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about when parenting becomes the main emotional escape for the parent. We have needs. There's no getting around it. And if we're not able to meet our needs and our spouse is neglecting our needs, we're going to have to get those needs met somewhere. And believe it or not, we'll actually use our children, not consciously, to meet those needs. Sometimes all of our emotional energy as a parent goes into the kids' sports activities, their schedules, their academics, their achievements. See, this is a way that we try to balance the system out. I'm miserable over here. Needs aren't being met, not being addressed. Conflict unresolved over here. I'm going to go over here to balance the system out. The child, meanwhile, unintentionally becomes the emotional center of the parent's world. And that's a lot of pressure on a child. Too much. Sometimes it's easier as the adult to over-focus on the child than actually have to deal with their own loneliness. The conflict that just left sitting on the table. The disconnection they feel with somebody they once loved. With someone they once thought they would spend the rest of their life with. With someone they used to tell people were their best friend. The thing to remember is most of us are not doing this on purpose. Again, our system is trying to find connection. Like I said, if we're not getting it here, we're going over here. We're looking for, we're searching for meaning in our family unit, closeness. If we're not getting that with our spouse, it's got to come from somewhere else. Children are supposed to be loved deeply, there's no doubt, but they are not meant to carry the emotional weight of an adult relationship. But when you're in survival mode, it makes sense that you're behaving like this with your children. The problem is that it can create unhealthy dynamics, over time. We call this enmeshment. A lot of these behaviors as parents, they started as ways to cope, as ways to help us regulate. If you're feeling miserable over here, but your child just delights you over here, obviously you're going to keep going back to that. If you're feeling lonely in your marriage, but you got kids, and you don't feel lonely with them, you're going to stick with that. It makes a ton of sense to our system. Right? There's a sense of relief to our nervous system that comes with that. So I'm just trying to help you see that some of these behaviors we do, although problematic, are understandable. A lot of our reactions are protective strategies. And our children are often reacting from our nervous system, not just our behavior, right? There was that saying of children will learn more from what you do than what you say to them. They'll remember that more. And that's why I think emotional regulation just goes such a long way with parenting, because we really get to step in and teach our children a skill in life that will never end. It's a constant payoff when you get to show up in your own adult relationships or whatever it is you're doing, work, and you've already been doing this inner work. So let's slow down and let's just try a little exercise together. Think about something that triggered you this week. What happened? This is where many of us go into the story part of the trigger, and that's okay. Just get an idea of what happened. Now, the big question, and it's okay if you don't know it, it's okay if you don't feel it, but what do you feel? You're triggered because of this happening. What do you notice comes up inside of you? Now, a tough one here is, what did you do? Or what did you attack back? Go into fight mode yourself? Get defensive? Maybe you went to flight mode, just withdrew, took off. And what might that reaction be trying to protect you from? It's interesting when we do this work. So I was triggered because my spouse did this. My children didn't listen to me. I felt like I felt angry because they're not listening to me. What I did was I lost my cool. I attacked. Or I felt the volcano erupting and I just tried to put a happy face on with the kids because I didn't want to upset them. But inside of me, I'm boiling up. What's my reaction protecting me from? Loneliness? Not feeling heard? Disrespected? There's a couple there. Our bodies also have a way of trying to help us out. When you get triggered, do you notice your body changing in any way? You know, when we get hungry, our stomach growls. When we're thirsty, we get dry mouth. But do you notice your chest tightening at all when you think about being triggered, or how you reacted in your last family situation? Jaw clenching. That's one of mine, by the way. Heart racing. Do you notice an urge to escape or to defend yourself. Again, another one of mine. I used to use escape back in my drinking days, which was why, interesting, sober over a decade, but still defending, still jaw clenching, an urge to want to shut down and withdraw and not talk about it. All that happens in sobriety. Healing is not just, never getting triggered. Healing is becoming more aware of what's happening inside and learning how to respond differently. So our spouse is going to trigger us. Our kids are going to trigger us. But how are we showing up? Again, I notice a difference in my heart when I'm just more loving. I am not perfect. I can be reactive. I can still have anger, right? I talk a lot about my parenting talks. Repair work goes a long way. I have to go back. Hey, son, right? I did it. I didn't mean to get that angry. That must have been scary for you. I apologize. That's my anger. I have to work on that. I shouldn't have talked to you like that. I shouldn't have scared you like that. I apologize. I'm sorry. And I'm doing what needs to be done to change that behavior. That's the key. Repair work is about change. People get sick of sorries all the time. So healing is just learning to slow down, right? I feel that trigger in here, and it's like, I'm just going to step away for a minute, gather my thoughts. What I do is I check in with my parts. What parts are coming up right now? What's going on with this angry part? Is my son not listening to me, hitting on something deeper? Right? For me, it's a respect thing. I almost feel like as his father, I'm teaching him how to respect me and people outside the home. It's my job. How I go about that is where the real learning takes place. A lot of times we try to earn respect by control, intimidating. Kids don't pick up on that. They might, it's possible, out of fear in the short term, but it usually plays out in the longer term. So I have to do what the work is in here. He's not disrespecting me. We're safe, we're okay. And I believe that within my system. Even if it looks like on the surface, and this is stuff that people have a hard time, because it's like, he is disrespecting you. Look what he just said. I know that it's something deeper in him. His own nervous system, his own protective parts are here right now. Because the moment he feels safe and comfortable, he goes right back to being my best buddy. That's when the teaching can happen. When we're on the same page, that connection was never broken. I'm not shaming or blaming him. He doesn't feel like dad is trying to control or attack him. He feels safe with me. Then I step into parenting role and say, listen, when you said that to me earlier, that's disrespectful. I'm your father. You can't talk to me like that. Now, I'm not saying the kids just magically go, oh, okay. Well, thanks for sharing that with me. I'll never disrespect you again. I'm a pretty down-to-earth guy. I get it. But what I've witnessed is children that feel that connection will absolutely take in what you're saying. They might not change overnight, but the change is happening. Stay patient. Keep practicing your own nervous system regulation, And it's going to start showing up in your family. There is no doubt in my mind. Kids listen to parents that I just know. Kids will listen to their parents more when their parent can stay grounded, stay in their lane, and step into their emotional world. Build that connection first. And then you'll find the teaching to be that much, I don't want to say easier, but let's say more effective. Long lasting. So healing is learning how to slow down in these moments when we're triggered. It's bringing self-awareness into the situation, emotional honesty. Again, emotional honesty sounds easy. It's like, oh, I just got to be honest with my emotions. But when you don't feel safe around people, your system is like, I'm not going to be honest. What happens if I say something and then they hold it against me? I'm not doing that. So we have more of an ability when we're healing to regulate ourselves, to communicate our needs with our loved one, and to set boundaries. One of the cool things I've learned is that we build a bigger capacity to actually deal with life stresses. Awareness creates space between the trigger and our reaction. So we're not in control of what people say and do, and if we get triggered, but we can learn to work with, how we respond to that. Boundary work is great here. If I'm gathering data on somebody because they keep hurting me, and I'm trying to be emotionally honest with them, and I'm voicing with them what I need from them, and they're doing nothing to meet me halfway to bring about change, right? Then that's a reality we have to step into. There's still some boundaries there that we can put in place. And again, it's not to punish them. It's what I mean by put in place to protect ourselves. I can forgive you, but I don't have to, deepen this relationship at this point right now. I can wish you well, but I still need to look out for myself right here. So a lot of our reactions developed for a reason. Be careful not to shame yourself. Nobody else should be shaming you either for the ways that you learn to survive. I'm telling you, I could help you make total sense out of what's happening in your life, because most people I come across aren't coming to me saying, you know what, I've been feeling really calm lately. No, they're in chaos, whether that's external chaos or internal chaos, and they need help sorting through it. Understanding your wounds is going to explain your behavior. But there's a caveat there I just want you guys to remember. It does not excuse harmful behavior. We have to take responsibility for that. So while we're healing and going through this process, we start learning, wow, okay, this is why I react the way I do. This is why parts of me show up in these situations. I get it. It's trying to help me out. But it could also be creating issues, and we just want to be mindful of that. Again, repair work goes a long way. A lot of people spend many years of their life trying to control their reactions. We have parts of ourselves that we don't like, and so we try to, just deny them. But the whole goal of understanding our system is to understand. Understand these parts we are in denial of. Understand the parts of us that we don't like. Understand the parts of us that are creating problems in our life. That's actually opens, when we start doing that for our in here, it opens the door to having so much capacity for other, so much compassion for other people. when we can start looking in here and saying, wow, like if I have all this going on within me, well, geez, maybe my spouse is in survival mode too. Maybe without me realizing, they're reacting from something old in their system that has nothing to do with me in this moment. So not only doing this work, do we really start understanding what's going on with us, it opens the door to understanding what's going on with our loved ones. And that's what I mean when I say our capacity grows. So your triggers are not random. A lot of them make sense once you understand. And it is 1:56. So another hour in the books. Anybody has any questions, anything they want to throw into the chat, I have no problem answering. So I just want to leave everyone too that these patterns of ours, guys, although they might feel like, well, I'm 40 years old, I'm 50 years old, I'm 60 years old, like this is just the way I am. You know, there's neuroplasticity out there. There's real, scientific evidence to back that up, that we can rewire our brains and our systems. We can change. It's hard. It's not easy work. It takes time, but it's absolutely possible. Thanks for those who logged on. If you listened, checked it out, I appreciate it. I really hope that you're able to take something out of this. If you need further help implementing it, that's where I needed the help. I learned a lot before I started this work. You can always reach out to me. You can message me on Facebook if you want. Instagram at Jared-Davin. And I've been posting these lives in case you missed it and you want to catch up and check it out on my YouTube channel, From Survival to Partnership. So we have 1 minute left. I'll give anyone a chance just to throw a question out there. If not, I'll log off once it hits 2 o'clock. Thank you guys again. All right. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday.